It's the difference between virtue and virtue signaling, the difference between heroism, the lady landing that plane, and make-believe heroism. I mean, it's all about make-believe heroism. And Trump, with his kind of, that big, obstreperous, sometimes rude, sometimes crude personality of his, makes everybody want to seem like the hero who's going to take him down. And they keep doing this thing where instead of taking him down, they find themselves somehow stooping to his level, and somehow he can do it. He can get away with it. I'm not sure why exactly, and they can't. So now you've got James Comey out there. I mean, this is really something else. James Comey has blown himself up. Basically, he went out there, he was going to do the whole virtue signaling thing. And of course, there's still some animosity from the left against James Comey because of his late in the election announcement that he was going to reopen the Hillary Clinton case, which he now says that he did under the impression she was going to win. So he was making his decisions according to the polls, which are maybe not the best way for an FBI director to make decisions. But it's really interesting. He had about an hour in the sun. Stephen Colbert was fawning all over him, but the rest of the press is starting to turn on him, and they're not, they're obviously not conservatives. Savannah Guthrie really started to needle him in a kind of, I found a kind of startling interview. Listen to this a little bit.
It feels like you might have some scores to settle, that you might have a little bit of anger left over and a little bit of bitterness. Would you plead guilty to all that?
Yeah, I wouldn't actually. I would take that one to trial because I think it is raw in the sense that I find it really painful to relive. Reading that book, doing the audiobook left me physically drained, but I really don't feel a sense of anger. I'm very worried, actually, which is why I'm doing something I don't love, which is talking about it and writing about it, but not anger.
There's been a lot of reactions to the book so far. Some of the most widely cited parts have to do with your description and words about President Trump. I mean, including calling his skin orange and saying his looked like he had tanning goggles. And, some people said that was kind of, for lack of a better word, that was a little catty. Did you enjoy taking those shots at the president?
No, I didn't think of them as shots, and I still don't.
Really?
Really? The orange, the funny white eyes, it's not shot. There's something, one of the things that I think is actually turning people against Comey is that there is something girly about the guy. He's always talking about his feelings. And by the way, I like girly in girls, but in guys, sometimes it just doesn't come across really well. He's always talking about his feeling states. I mean, you could see even Savannah Guthrie used the word catty, which is usually a word that she used to describe women. There's something about this guy that just comes across as, I don't know, just kind of weak, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. Just somehow, he's not coming across the way he wants to. And he's suffering from what I've come to call the Trump effect, which is that somehow Trump can do this stuff where he attacks people personally, and when they try and do it back, they look bad. So here is this guy pretending that he is the pinnacle of honor, the pinnacle of integrity, the absolute model of decency. He himself says he falls in love with his own virtue, and you can just see James Comey alone with his own virtue. Virtue, I love you, I love my virtue. And yet, here he is doing what Trump does, which completely contradicts and takes away from the effect of it. And so he's trying to be a hero, but instead he's coming off like kind of a buffoon. And CNN, Evan Perez, his name is, and he's their justice guy. He's their justice commentator. And even he comes on and he has started to notice the Trump effect, basically, the way this blows back on the guy. And here's a guy who's talking, I think he's a liberal. He's obviously speaking from a liberal point of view. His beef with Comey is what he did to Hillary Clinton. But listen to what he says.
He, unfortunately, is suffering the same fate that everybody who decides to play by Donald Trump's playbook, right? Using some of the same tactics, some of the cheap things, frankly. I think that they're cheap. To be making comments about the president's marriage, to be making comments about his tan and his tie and all that stuff. I think that's what happens to you when you go there. And you saw this in the campaign, right? People who decided to go mano a mano with candidate Trump ended up looking worse for it. And so I think my fear is that I think for Comey, and I think we're going to start digesting this over the next couple of weeks, he's going to come across looking worse than I think he
I don't want to.
You know, it's funny, he's sitting there saying that on CNN. I thought they must have been sitting there going, wait, what? We're not supposed to attack his marriage? We're not supposed to attack his looks? We're not supposed to attack him every minute? Maybe that's why only 7 people are watching us and all of them are running to catch a plane at the time. You know, the same thing, virtually the same thing is happening to Stormy Daniels. You know, now Stormy Daniels, the Stormy Daniels story is originally a Wall Street Journal story. They're the ones who broke the story about Michael Cohen paying off the porn star to keep quiet. And the sense that it becomes a financial story and a legal story, as it's becoming with this woman, Kimber Wood, I think her name is, the judge, who is such a partisan judge that she, actually officiated at George Soros's wedding. You know, all of that may pose real dangers for Donald Trump. So far, I don't see any, but still, it could pose real dangers. What would have to happen is first they would have to get Michael Cohen on bank fraud, and then they would have to prove somehow that Trump had basically told him to do it. So not only that he had taken out a home loan to make these payoffs, but Trump had said, take out a home loan to make these payoffs, because otherwise, what do they have? They have maybe Donald Trump conspired to misuse campaign funds. It's very, very tough stuff. It's not going to happen. I just do not believe that this is going to reach the level where the public will stand for impeachment, because even the people who dislike Trump, maybe the people who hate Trump don't care what he gets impeached for, but even the people who dislike Trump do not want to see elections overturned. It is not a good look. It is not a good look to overturn democratic elections using legal means to criminalize the opponents, because that's kind of the South American way. That is the tin pot dictator way to come and arrest you for being in the other party. But Stormy Daniels herself is just starting to look, I don't know, like a cheap porn star or something like that. I don't know. She's on The View, and she is putting forward this idea that she was threatened, and she says she remembers this guy's face. Here she is talking about how she was threatened to keep quiet.
He walked up behind me and I saw his reflection, and I turned around and I thought for sure he was going to say, hey, do you know where the such and such class is, or what building is whatever? And he had his hands in his pocket and he looked at my daughter, and I just remember him saying, like, oh, it's a beautiful little girl. I'd be ashamed if something happened to her mom. Forget about this story. Leave Mr. Trump alone. And it was like, it didn't even register to me at first. And then he turned and walked away. And like I said, his face is burned in my memory. And
so her face, that's painful to have a face burned into your memory, but then she put forward this, this, what do they call them, where the crime artist, the forensic artist, does a description, from your description, does a drawing of the suspect. So they put up this picture. Do you have the picture of the suspect? There it is. It's Steve Crowder, obviously. Some people said it was Tom Brady, but I don't know. I've never seen Crowder and this guy together. But obviously the funny one is that her ex-husband looks exactly like this drawing. I mean, he's almost a dead ringer for this drawing. I don't know. Listen, I wasn't there. Maybe the story is true. It sounds like cheap dialogue from a B movie. Guy does the picture, looks exactly like her ex-husband. Very suspicious. But she goes on to say, so then they asked her on The View, they asked her why she hadn't come forward before. And so she unreels this story.
First of all, I was scared. It was expressly what he told me not to do. And I went home and regrouped and I was going to, because I always feel like you should stand up for yourself and you should report it. But the problem with that in this particular instance I would have gone to the police and would have gone, okay, a man approached me. This is what he said to me. He told me to leave Mr. Trump alone. And their very next question, the detective would have asked me, why would somebody tell you to leave Mr. Trump alone? And I would have had to answer that question, which was not public at the time. And I would have had to tell an entire police department, and police reports are public record. I know that for a fact. I had sex with Donald Trump. And then the whole world would have known, and I was in the process of trying to quiet that or figure out what to do. And honestly, I was just afraid, and I didn't want everyone to know. I didn't want my family to find out that way. I didn't want my life turned upside down.
Again, not believing the story. I'm not buying the story. So she's a porn star, but she didn't want to damage her sexual reputation. I mean, is that the story? I don't know. I mean, look, I am absolutely sure she's telling the truth. I'm not absolutely sure. I'm fairly sure she's telling the truth that she had a relationship with Donald Trump. I'm pretty sure she was paid off to keep quiet, all of that. But I do think she is basically manipulating, getting this moment to get her moment, her 15 minutes of fame. And And again, Trump can do things that I don't approve of, that maybe look a little, rude and crude, and yet somehow he gets away with it. Maybe because there's no hypocrisy to the man. He is what he is. He's not what he's not. He hasn't pretended to be anything that he's not. Whereas here's a woman pretending to act out of virtue. Again, she's pretending to be a hero, coming forward, daring, to stand up to the powerful men, but basically getting money. Meghan McCain on The View takes her out for exactly that.
Because you didn't have anything to do with the case, it seemed a little like you were just trying to get attention, which I understand that you're being sued by our president, but it does seem like you're benefiting a lot. I mean, you've gone on your Make America Horny Again tour. I'm sure you're making a lot of money, no disrespect. No. I hadn't heard your name until all of this had happened, and now you are literally live on The View giving an entire interview with us. So it has been beneficial for your career.
Yes, I've gotten more bookings than usual, but I'm doing the job that I've been doing for the last almost 20 years. Yes, there's a lot of publicity, but I didn't do it for that because this isn't what I want to be known for.
I'm going to be at the University of Texas, Austin tonight. I'm going to be speaking. And what I'm going to speak about, I just want to talk about the narrative. I hate going to these speeches with this idea that I'm some kind of warrior and I'm going to beat down the opposition and all this. I really just want to talk. I actually want to hear from the students, but I do want to talk about the narrative because, you're living in this country that's free. You're living in a country where it's less racist than other countries. You're living in a country where there are heroes like a lady who can land a plane after its engine blows out, which is no easy thing. You're living in a country where people are still, where the president and all the levers of power are working to try and make the world more peaceful, which is a complicated thing to do. And then we're living also in this world of the narrative where Stormy Daniels is supposed to be a hero, where James Comey is supposed to be a man of integrity, where things are dark because Starbucks is such a racist company and we have to protest Starbucks, which is utter nonsense as far as I'm concerned. I'm still calling BS on that story. It hasn't come out fully yet, but I just do not know why two guys, when the police ask them to leave a coffee shop, why they don't leave and why they shouldn't be arrested. I don't understand that. But still, we don't live on television, and we're, in the end, I do believe that we're going to support the people who actually do courageous things and the people who actually make the world a better place. And these people who are just play acting, who are just, virtue signaling, as they say, who are just trying to establish some form of heroism in a world that doesn't provide all those many opportunities for heroism because it's so safe. I do not think they're ultimately going to be believed. I don't think they're ultimately going to be followed. In worst case scenario for them, they suffer the Trump effect and are completely dissed and completely left behind in the dust.